The Miami Dolphins shook up the NFL world when they traded Jalen Ramsey to the Pittsburgh Steelers earlier this week. And on today's show, I am going to look at an updated list of free agent and trade targets that Miami could ultimately add to this roster to replace Jalen Ramsey. And boy, do they need to add another corner to this group. Because yes, they got Minkah Fitzpatrick back in that return, and it's going to help the back end with a better safety room for sure. But this cornerback room is simply not good enough if you ask me. Kader Koh, who is your nickel corner, feel very good about that. I have no issue there. He's one of the best nickel corners in the NFL. And maybe Miami views him as someone who can move outside and they play like one of the safeties like Fitzpatrick, Melifon, Murash, and Davis in the nickel. But Cam Smith and Storm Duck, the two projected boundary corners at this point in the offseason, simply are not good enough. And maybe someone emerges and they play really well in training camp to inspire more confidence in me. But as of right now, I do not have any confidence in any of those two to be starting caliber corners. So I think Miami needs to add one. They likely will add one. And we're going to talk about who they could add on today's show. But I want you to get your thoughts out there first. If you had to pick one corner to add to the roster to replace Jalen Ramsey, who would it be? Pick a CB you want to see added to this roster as we get closer and closer to Dolphins training camp. I am giving you 5 corners today, and I am also ranking them based on likelihood. We have a couple free agent targets, a couple trade targets, and I am going to go 1 through 5 in terms of which one I think is the most likely to come to the Miami Dolphins. These would not be my order of way I would do it, but this is what I think is actually going to happen. And the number 1 corner is Rasul Douglas, the free agent, who played for the Buffalo Bills last season, did not play that well, former Green Bay Packer. The point is, the reason why I have ranked number 1 is because it feels like this is the corner that the Dolphins have shared the most interest in. Just around NFL draft time, they had Rasul Douglas visit Dolphins headquarters. Miami offered Douglas a contract, but Rasul did not agree. He declined it. He thought he was not getting enough money. But it has been widely reported by Barry Jackson that the Dolphins have kept in contact with the former Buffalo Bills corner, and I think they ultimately could spin the block and offer him a little bit more money to ensure that he joins this team in the 305. And he did not have a good 2024 season. There's no other way to sugarcoat that. He had a horrible QB rating when targeted. He just was getting torched left and right. Now, a lot of it is because when watching the film and looking at the numbers, the Buffalo Bills played more man coverage than they did the year prior when Douglas was actually really good for them. Remember, the Bills traded him from the Packers at the trade deadline. And I do think that he would better fit in Miami than Buffalo because we run more of a zone type of scheme. I do think he is the most likely, as it has been reported the Dolphins have continuously checked in and maintained contact with Douglas. And I just think it's all about Rasul realizing that he might not get much more money elsewhere, and he joins Miami to become a potential starting boundary corner. The number 2 most likely outcome to me is Asante Samuel Jr., the youngest and probably maybe most sought after free agent still on the market. And I really like Asante Samuel Jr. He has continuously been the person I say the most that I want because of his higher upside type of signing ability here. And he didn't really play that much in 2024 due to injury. He had a shoulder injury, a neck injury, and we'll talk about that neck injury here in a second. But when he was in 2023, he played really well for the Chargers, and he was able to display an ability to play in man. You see his numbers on the left, and he still was pretty solid in zone coverage as well on the right. He is simply put the best free agent available at the cornerback position. He's still only 25 years old, former second-round pick, and he's been extremely productive. Now, if you can remember, and we've said this in the past, but in case you were just watching for the first time, I want to make sure the new viewers are aware. Samuel Jr. is going to sign over the next couple of weeks. He is getting a medical checkup on his neck that he had surgery on in April. And once he is medically cleared and NFL teams are given the green light on Asante Samuel Jr.'s rehab and when he's going to be ready for this upcoming season, that's when teams are likely going to start signing Asante Samuel Jr. So I would be ready for him to potentially sign in the next 2 weeks or so, as long as he is medically cleared. And I know the Miami Dolphins have reached out and been in contact, so we'll see if they ultimately pull the trigger on Asante Samuel Jr. And when the Dolphins inevitably make a move at corner, whether it's a trade or a signing, we will have you covered. We have consistently had you covered this week with the Waller trade, with the Jalen Ramsey trade. So make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a piece of our content. The third player on my list is going to be Jaylen Watson, the Kansas City Chiefs corner. Now, this would have to be a trade. So this is the first time that I am putting a trade target on this list for the Miami Dolphins. But I do believe Miami could show interest in Watson, and I believe that he would be the one that Miami would show interest in the most because I think he would be very cheap to acquire. And remember, we have mentioned this in the past, but Brett Veach, the Kansas City Chiefs GM, has not re-signed a cornerback that he has drafted since he's been there in Kansas City. The player that will be re-signed for the first time to break this tradition and trend is when they inevitably re-sign Trent McDuffie, who is an all-pro corner. So they'll re-sign the all-pro, but they feel confident in their ability to draft and develop other corners to kind of fill out their roster. Jaylen Watson has been pretty good in his career. He's played about 1,000 snaps, and last season, before he suffered a shoulder injury, he was really good in the 500 snaps that he played. Only allowed 1 touchdown, QB rating of 92.8, completion percentage of under 60. Yeah, that will play. He's also got really good size to him, about 6'2", and he's long, so he can be that prototypical outside boundary corner that Miami's kind of searching for to replace Jalen Ramsey. You make a trade for Jaylen Watson, which might only cost you a 4th or 5th round pick, which I do not think would be a bad move for Miami. You now have a secondary of Watson, Kohu, Storm Duck, Cam Smith, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Yafatu Malifonwu, Ashtyn Davis, and that is a group that is very versatile, very multiple, and could cause havoc on the back end. I think he's the third most likely guy, the number 1 most likely trade target, and if I am Chris Grier and I had his ear, I would be trying to get him to the Miami Dolphins. All right, number 4 is James Bradberry. And I know when we talk about free agent cornerback targets, I never put Bradberry on the list. It's always Stephon Gilmore or Mike Hilton. But as I mentioned, I'm doing updated cornerback targets on what I think could be the most likely outcome for Miami and Chris Grier. And unfortunately, I do think James Bradberry is like number 4 on the list. This is not me saying that I want James Bradberry, because that is actually not the case whatsoever. I want to stay away from James Bradberry. I'm out on the veteran. But I know the Dolphins have held interest in the former corner for the Detroit Lions, for the Philadelphia Eagles. He didn't really play last season, so he's got a full year off. That's concerning. Maybe you can make the argument that him having a year off could give him fresh perspective, fresh legs, and be better prepared for this upcoming season, like I mentioned in the video a couple days ago with Darren Waller on how that year off could ultimately benefit him going forward. But the truth is, if I'm trying to add a corner to this roster, there's just better free agents available. I would prefer Mike Hilton. I'd prefer Stephon Gilmore. I'd prefer the other 2 free agents that we talked about, and I'm not even mentioning the potential trade targets here on the episode as well. James Bradberry, would I be mad if the Dolphins signed him? No, but if the Dolphins do grab Bradberry, I would hope that it's alongside another corner added to the roster and not just James Bradberry. One more target to look at here in a second, but this Dolphins Nike Polo, on sale for $25 off. How about that? Usually $65. You can grab it for $40 right now. Chatsports.com/MIA Nike Polo. Links in the description and comments of today's video. Love this little awesome, well-fit polo. Grab yours today. Chatsports.com/MIA Nike Polo. Last target we'll talk about. It's another trade target for Miami. This one is Greg Newsome, the Cleveland Browns cornerback. This is someone that can play on the boundary for the Miami Dolphins, former first-round pick out of Northwestern, final year of his rookie deal. He's on that 5th-year option. Remember, he's in the same draft class as Jalen Phillips and Jalen Waddle, who are both playing on their 5th-year options this year. We know Waddle's extended. We know that Jalen Phillips is not extended as of now. But Greg Newsome is an interesting player who's had a lot of experience. He's had some good numbers, completion percentage at 63%, QB rating of 94.5, only allowed 10 touchdowns and 3,000 snaps. That will play. Jaylen Watson, as much as I like him, and I think he's more likely than Newsome, he has given him 9 touchdowns and about 1,000 coverage snaps. So you see the number there, a little bit better. This is as high upside as it gets. You can talk about making a signing that could pay dividends, but if you swing a trade for Greg Newsome, who's had 3 really good years in his career, down 4th season, if he balls out again in Miami and has a good year in his final year under contract, the Dolphins could extend him and have a CB1 of the future. That's the type of upside that Greg Newsome would bring to the table for Miami. I think it would only cost you a fourth or fifth as well, due to him being a free agent to be this upcoming offseason. Greg Newsome is a player Cleveland has been rumored to be having on the trade block as well. I would be very much intrigued with adding Greg Newsome via trade. So let me ask you this. How should the Dolphins add a cornerback to their roster? They're going to add one, heck, maybe even two, but definitely one. If they only added one, should they sign a player or trade for a player? S for sign, type T for trade. I don't know what they do, but I will make this clear. I prefer a trade. I would rather send a day 3 pick for either Greg Newsome or Jaylen Watson, because if those two were both free agents, they would be the number one sought-after free agent. And if we're going to be completely honest, if Greg Newsome or Jaylen Watson were free agents this upcoming offseason, or this offseason, I should say, they would have already been signed. They probably would have signed in the first week. So, yeah, if you could get the best corner available and they are actually on the trade block, I would send a fourth. I'd send a 5th-round pick to grab one of these corners, and then you get them in your building. You could extend them, let the year play out, and then sign them to an extension. Sign them to an extension in the middle of the year if you like what they're bringing to the table. That's just how I prefer the Dolphins ultimately get this done to replace Jalen Ramsey and move forward in this offseason. But as I've mentioned consistently, when the Dolphins make a move, we'll have you cover the video. So subscribe for more Dolphins coverage.